Here I'm going to show you how to change the cross-section to an ellipse. If I go to my project, this is my original one, and as I was playing around with it, I guess it got, it felt like there was an update on the geometry, which is not true. And I believe if I just say update over here, I'll get back my original results. But I'm not going to worry about that now. I will create a duplicate of this. In fact, I want to keep the same material, so I'll keep the same engineering data and I'll duplicate from geometry this time. And you see it has the same engineering data, so I can't modify this. I'll go and modify that. But now I can modify the geometry. Let me rename that to elliptical shaft and then bring up space claim. And once space claim comes up, you might be in the groups tab, go to the structure tab and highlight solid and delete it. Now I need to sketch the ellipse, so let me select the sketching plane to be XY. I have to play around with this. I had to play around a little bit to get it to be sketching on the XY plane. You might have to do that. So that I was clicking on the XY plane. And then if I select ellipse and say snapping to curve center over here, so that's one of the axes of the ellipse. So if I hit, if I have the left mouse button, let's say that one, I want it to be 0.9, and then I want this to be actually not that one. I want this to be, so I want that to be 0.5. I want this to be 0.9. Rather the other way around. So you can get the right dimensions. And then if I say escape, and then if I go to 3D mode, I get my ellipse. You might want to orient it with the long axis along Y. And then I need to just pull it. So I'd say pull, I'll highlight it, and the natural pull direction is the right one. Say hit the space bar and say 4.2 or whatever the length you want, and then say escape. So that's all there is to the geometry. And if I come back to the project page, you see it says, oh, your geometry has changed. So I will say refresh. So that'll bring in the new geometry into the model. So it'll bring the upstream data downstream. And if I go into mechanical, I'll see that, I have a question mark here, question mark here, question mark here. So it has kept all the things in the tree, but it doesn't know what they apply to because the geometry has changed. So let's go down the tree. If I come to geometry, it says, hey, you have a new geometry. What's the material? So I'll say go big red. That will give me the right values of E and new in the constitutive model. And then the mesh, if I go the face sizing, I believe that sizing was for this face. So I need to make sure that the face selection filter is selected. And then I'll say apply. And then the face meshing, I believe we apply to this face and this face. So I'll say apply. Okay. Now let me try to see what that mesh looks like. And sometimes the update doesn't work. So what you have to do then is right click and say generate mesh. And you see that actually this symbol indicates that the face meshing failed. So I'll just suppress it. And then if I update or generate mesh, I see that it's, it gives me hexahedral elements, which for the same number of nodes has higher accuracy. So that's a better mesh, or at least more efficient mesh. And let's say I want to get, I can put in like a smaller face sizing here. So I might want to select those two surfaces and put in a sizing, let's say 0.2, and then update. Take a look at the mesh. You might want to go smaller, and you can also get it to refine over the curvature by going to sizing and turning on capture curvature. So I'll say yes, and maybe change this face sizing to 0.1. These are just, some possible settings. And okay, you can see there's a little bit of refinement near the curvature, and that looks, that looks like a decent mesh. You should look at the mesh sensitivity, but I worry about that later. So that's a good enough mesh. And then it says, oh, for the boundary conditions. Oh, by the way, when you go to mesh, you should always check the number of nodes and the number of degrees of freedom. And if I go down, okay, that's still pretty small. And especially working with the student, if you're working with the student version, this has to be less than 32,000. And then you go and rescope these, and then you resolve, and that should get you the new solution. And sometimes, output entities can throw an error and it'll say it failed, and you might have to suppress these. In this case, it actually goes ahead, but sometimes just suppressing these will get you a solution because it's not defined for the new geometry. So be careful about that. That's really all there is to changing the geometry.